The Galactic Council had never before sought anything from humanity, nor had humans ever imagined that day would come. For 3 centuries, the elder races had kept Earth at arm's length, like a neighbor one greets politely but never invites inside. Every year, human ambassadors submitted their applications for membership, and every year they were met with kind smiles and gentle refusals. The meaning was always the same, that humans were too young, too violent, and too unpredictable to be trusted within the bounds of galactic civilization. The Valorans, beings of living crystal with 10 millennia of accumulated wisdom, regarded humanity the way a teacher might watch a child playing with fire. The Kethi could share thoughts and dreams across light years, their telepathic communion making human speech seem crude and sluggish. The Dromath had forged machines and weapons so advanced that even Earth's brightest engineers could barely grasp the underlying science, and all of these elder races agreed on one truth, that humanity belonged on the periphery of known space, where it could do no harm. Ambassador Kellen Briggs had stood in those council chambers countless times across his 20 years of service, presenting humanity's case with logic, passion, and meticulous preparation, but each time, the response was the same polished refusal, veiled in the language of patience and proper timing and the need for mankind to grow wiser. Kellen had grown weary of hearing no, but he never gave up, because that was what humans did when faced with a locked door. They kept knocking. Then everything changed when the Skrull arrived. They came like a storm of fire and metal, sweeping through the outer rim and consuming everything in their path. They sought neither peace nor negotiation, only conquest and annihilation. The elder races, who had lived in tranquil certainty for thousands of years, now faced an enemy that cared nothing for their wisdom, their technology, or their long histories. The Valoran defense fleets went forth with confidence, for they had never known defeat in 10,000 years, and their ships were masterpieces of grace and precision. But the Skrull fought without grace or order, and they cared nothing for the beauty of crystal vessels. When the battle ended, the once proud Valoran fleet was nothing but wreckage adrift in darkness, and the survivors could scarcely believe what had befallen them. The Kethi turned to their telepathic webs, attempting to sow confusion in the Skrull ranks, hoping mental warfare might succeed where force had failed. But Skrull minds were alien, filled only with hunger and fury. Those who touched them came away shattered, and the great psychic networks that had bound their worlds for ages went dark, one after another. The Dromath, certain of their supremacy, unleashed their mightiest dreadnoughts, moon-sized warships armed with weapons capable of cracking worlds, planets. But the Skrull came in such vast numbers that they blotted out the stars themselves, swarming over the Dromath dreadnoughts like a living tide of insects. Not a single one of those mighty ships ever returned home. Only then did the Council summon Kellen, and when he entered the chamber this time, everything had changed. There were no polite smiles, no gentle dismissals, only the unmistakable presence of fear in the eyes of beings who had never known it before. The Valoran Prime stood before him, her crystalline body flickering uncertainly, like a candle struggling against the wind. Through her translator, she spoke in a trembling voice. "Your species possesses something we do not. For 3 centuries we called it savagery, violence, and aggression. But now we see it for what it truly is, experience. You have never ceased to fight. Your wars lasted generations, and you understand conflict in ways we have long forgotten. We need that knowledge now, because we are dying." Kellen's gaze moved slowly across the chamber, meeting the faces of every council member. He saw desperation in them all. He took no pleasure in their fear. Cruelty was not in his nature, but neither would he pretend that everything was well. "You shut us out," he said quietly. "Called us dangerous, unfit for your so-called civilized galaxy." Council Speaker Theron, the Cathari representative, stepped forward. His telepathic voice touched Kellen's mind, carrying waves of sorrow and genuine remorse. "We were wrong," Theron said. "We judged you by the standards of those who had forgotten what it means to fight for survival. We are paying the price for that arrogance, and now we need you. The entire galaxy needs you." Kellen reached into his jacket and withdrew his communicator, simple by galactic standards, but dependable, and that mattered more to humans than elegance. "I'll send your request to Earth," he said. "But understand this, if we come our way. No restrictions, no council observers telling us how to fight. No rules except our own, because wars aren't won by following diplomatic protocols." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. In that instant, they realized they were surrendering something they had guarded for millennia: control. But the alternative was extinction. And so, with her light dimming faintly, the Valoran Prime spoke. "We accept your terms." The message reached Earth within hours, traveling through quantum relays that linked humanity's homeworld to the greater galactic network. The transmission arrived on the desk of Fleet Admiral Patricia Cole, Supreme Commander of all human military forces, stationed at Luna Command, an immense fortress carved into the moon and shielded by layers of armor and defenses capable of withstanding anything short of a direct fusion strike. Patricia had dedicated her entire life to service, first commanding the ocean-going navies of old Earth, then leading the void fleets that patrolled the darkness between worlds. She had risen through the ranks not by favor or politics, but by sheer competence, and she understood warfare in ways few could comprehend. When she read the Council's request, she smiled. She had been preparing for this moment for 3 decades. She called an emergency session of the Joint Chiefs, and within minutes, the highest-ranking officers of Earth's forces gathered in a secure chamber deep beneath Luna's surface. General Marcus Webb, head of the Marine Corps, glanced over the message and asked, "Do we even have enough ships? Our fleet was designed to defend the solar system, not to fight a galactic war." Patricia activated a holographic display, illuminating the room with the blue glow of hundreds of vessels. "We have 200 battleships, 600 cruisers, and over 1,000 support craft," she said. "We've been building and training for a war the Council swore would never come." She paused, a faint smile crossing her face. "Looks like our paranoia paid off." The decision came swiftly. Humans excelled at making decisions under pressure. Within 6 hours, orders were transmitted to every ship and every crew. The message was clear. Humanity was going to war, and they would show the galaxy what 3 centuries of rejection had forged. The designated rally point was Sector 447, an empty patch of space near the Cathari border that had never been of importance until now. It was about to become the most vital location in the galaxy. The Council had expected perhaps 50 ships, 100, if Earth was generous. They still had no idea what humanity had become in its long isolation. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his battleship, defiant, watching as ships appeared through the jump points. At 38, he was young for a capital ship commander, but he had earned his rank through fire and discipline, first in the Belt Wars, when mining colonies fought bitterly over asteroid claims, and later during the Martian uprising when the Red Planet sought independence. From those battles, Jake had learned that wars were not won by the biggest guns, but by crews who knew how to use them. The first arrivals were the Vanguard-class cruisers, sleek, fast and deadly, their matte gray hulls absorbing sensor beams. They spread across the perimeter, forming a tight defensive ring. Then came the battleships, rows upon rows of steel giants bristling with weapons refined over decades. Jake watched with quiet pride as the fleet assembled with flawless precision, each vessel sliding into formation like dancers in a cosmic ballet. At the communications station, Lieutenant Amy Patterson monitored the flood of status reports, her console alive with green lights. "All ships reporting ready, Captain," she said, her voice steady despite the storm she knew was coming. Jake nodded, jaw tightening in the familiar calm before battle. He'd long since learned that confidence was contagious. If the captain held steady, so would the crew. "Signal the fleet," he said. "Hold formation, and let's show these elder races what discipline really looks like." On the observation platform that floated in silent orbit nearby, the council representatives had gathered to witness humanity's arrival. They stood within their environmental suits, containment fields, or shimmering energy bubbles, whatever their species required, and watched in collective awe as more and more human ships appeared. A Dromath observer broke the silence first. "This is impossible," he muttered. The computational power required to coordinate so many vessels in such tight formation would demand a processor the size of a city. A Valoran analyst, her crystalline body pulsing with hues of confusion and disbelief, replied softly, "They are not using computers for formation control." Her tone carried genuine shock as the realization struck her. Each captain is holding position manually, through training and skill alone. Still, the fleet kept expanding. The battleships formed the unyielding core of the formation, like the clenched fist of a giant hand. Around them, cruisers spread outward into protective screens, their point defense grids overlapping seamlessly to create kill zones that nothing smaller than a capital ship could penetrate. Behind them followed the support vessels, massive carriers filled with fighters, supply ships laden with ammunition and fuel, and specialized electronic warfare platforms capable of jamming enemy sensors and communications. At the center of it all loomed Admiral Patricia Cole's the flagship, the Vengeance, a dreadnought larger than any other ship in the human armada, pulsing with quiet, restrained power. It held position dead center, the heart of a vast living organism. Patricia stood upon her bridge, hands clasped behind her back, studying the tactical display with cool satisfaction. Everything was unfolding exactly as she had planned. Commander Ryan Foster, overseeing communications, looked up from his console. "Admiral, we're receiving a message from the Council," he said. "They're asking if this represents our full fleet." There was amusement in his voice at the question's naivety. Patricia allowed herself a rare, faint smile. "Tell them this is Battle Group 1, she replied. "Inform them that Battle Groups 2 through 5 are holding position in reserve, back in human space." She paused briefly, then added, "Each battle group contains the same number of ships." The silence that followed on the Council's observation platform was absolute. The representatives exchanged uneasy glances, shock melting into fear, as they finally understood that humanity had built a war machine far beyond anything they had imagined. The humans had been preparing for this moment for centuries. Commander Lisa Hayes, Chief Tactical Officer aboard the Vengeance, had spent 20 years studying every war in human history, from ancient terrestrial conflicts to modern interplanetary campaigns. Eyes fixed on her tactical readout, she reported, "Admiral, scrawl forward elements detected, 300 ships bearing 270, range 1 million kilometers and closing fast." Patricia's voice remained calm, the tone of someone giving routine orders rather than leading a fleet into battle. "Signal the fleet," she said evenly. "All ships to battle stations. Arm all weapons. Prepare to engage on my mark." Across the human armada, klaxons wailed. Crews sprinted to their posts. Massive railguns were loaded with slugs the size of small cars, missile tubes filled with fusion warheads and kinetic penetrators, and energy cannons charged until the decks thrummed with contained power. The Skrull fleet advanced, chaotic, brutal, a writhing swarm of metallic predators driven by instinct rather than discipline. Behind them, the Council's own ships positioned safely at a distance transmitted a request to join the human battle line, eager to defend their threatened worlds. Patricia shook her head. "Negative," she said. "Tell them to hold position and watch. It's time they saw what human warfare truly looks like." Her words carried no arrogance, only the quiet certainty of a commander who knew exactly what her fleet was capable of. The humans held their fire, letting the enemy draw closer, the elder races, watching from afar, grew restless and confused. They could not fathom why the humans had not yet opened fire. A Cathari observer sent a telepathic inquiry, wondering if perhaps the human weapons systems had malfunctioned. But there was no malfunction, only waiting. Malfunction. But Admiral Patricia Cole knew exactly what she was doing. Every passing second that the Skrull advanced tightened the firing solutions of her fleet, increasing both accuracy and impact. When the range closed to 50,000 kilometers, Patricia gave the quiet, measured command. All ships, open, fire. What followed would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. The void ignited with fury beyond anything the elder races had ever imagined. Human. Railguns thundered in perfect sequence, launching tungsten slugs at near-relativistic speeds. Each round struck like the wrath of a god, punching through Skrull hulls from bow to stern, tearing vast tunnels through metal and atmosphere alike. The impacts didn't merely damage ships. They erased them, leaving behind expanding cones of incandescent debris. Missiles followed by the thousands, streaking like burning comets across the darkness. The cruisers' point defense lasers carved through incoming Skrull ordnance with surgical precision, while the human warheads darted and wove, guided by battle AIs that made split-second adjustments mid-flight. Energy weapons added to the storm, silent beams that became visible only upon impact, when enemy armor boiled, melted, and vanished into vapor. 18 minutes later, the battle was over. 300 Skrull ships were reduced to drifting wreckage, twisted, shards of once mighty war vessels tumbling lifelessly. Through the void, the human fleet had sustained light damage to a handful of ships. There were 0 casualties. On the Council's observation platform, no one spoke. They had just witnessed something that shattered their understanding of war itself. The Skrull had conquered 47 star systems before facing humanity. In every invasion, their brutal simplicity had prevailed. Overwhelming numbers, savage aggression, no strategy but annihilation. Against the elder races, who clung to their codes of honor and meticulously planned tactics, it had always been enough. But the humans were different. They understood the language of chaos. They had written it. Aboard the Defiant, Lieutenant Commander Greg Hamilton sat at the weapons console, his hands moving with the calm precision of long habit. He had fired these weapons 1,000 times in simulations and 100 times in real combat. "Contact in 30 seconds, Captain," he said evenly. Fear had no place here. Discipline left no room for it. Captain Jake Morrison studied the incoming ships on the tactical display. They were hideous. Brutal, angular monstrosities bristling with weapons welded on with no sense of design or grace. "All batteries," he ordered. "Target their capital ships first. Take down the big ones. The rest will break." The human fleet still held its fire. It was a test of nerve few species could pass. But humanity had learned long ago that patience kills faster than panic. Admiral Cole watched her tactical display, voice low and steady as she murmured, "Steady." "Steady." Then, at exactly 50,000 kilometers, she spoke the words again. "All ships, open fire." The void erupted. Railguns roared, hurling hyperdense tungsten rounds at a fraction of light speed. The kinetic energy behind each slug was measured in kilotons, and armor designed to resist plasma and beam weaponry was useless against solid matter moving that fast. The first Skrull ship was gutted instantly. The slug tore through it, then through the next, and sometimes even a third, ripping straight lines of destruction through the swarm. Internal detonations followed as reactors ruptured, magazines ignited, and compartments vented explosively into space. The Skrull had never faced weapons or an enemy like this before, their very identity as a species. Violence was not glorified but understood, a tool, dangerous yet necessary, to ensure survival. The Dromath analyst watched in stunned silence as the replay ended, and for the first time in his long life, he felt fear not of destruction, but of awe. Humanity had done what no elder race could. They had turned war into pure mathematics. Every shot and maneuver executed with a precision that bordered on instinct. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the flagship Resolute. Her expression calm despite the devastation she had just unleashed. The reports came in. All enemy ships confirmed destroyed, no losses, minimal damage. Around her, the crew exhaled collectively, the tension of battle slowly bleeding away. Patricia nodded once and said quietly, "Transmit to the Council. Operation complete." Her tone carried no triumph, only finality. Far across the void in the council chambers, silence reigned. The elder species stared at the after-action recordings with disbelief. The Valoran Prime's crystalline frame dimmed as she whispered, "They did this in minutes," and no one spoke to contradict her. The Cathari speaker closed his eyes and said, "We thought them savages, but what we have just seen is mastery beyond comprehension." The truth was undeniable. Humanity's violence had not been a flaw. It had been their evolution. While others had grown complacent under peace, humans had sharpened themselves through endless conflict, turning chaos into discipline, fear into resolve. And as the debris of 300 Skrull warships drifted silently through the dark, the galaxy finally understood what it meant when humanity went to war. Their DNA, their culture, the very fiber of what it meant to be human, had been sharpened by conflict. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge, studying the casualty reports, and felt a private relief. They had won with no lives lost, and every member of her fleet was somebody's child, somebody's loved one. She took that duty seriously. "Well done," she said. "Secure from battle stations. Begin damage assessment and prepare for the next engagement. This is only the beginning." The Skrull main force was still out there, devouring worlds and gathering strength. The first fight had been a victory, but everyone knew the true trial lay ahead. The enemy numbered in the thousands, and humanity had already shown its hand. The next clash would be harder. The Skrull would learn and adapt. The win at Sector 447 had been clean and absolute, but Cole refused to celebrate. Intelligence placed the main enemy force at over 5,000 ships, currently 3 systems away, consuming the industrial world of Rethus Prime, once a Droth manufacturing hub, and with every hour more resources flowed into enemy hands. She convened a virtual conference with her senior officers. Their holographic figures shimmered around the briefing table. These were veterans who had earned their posts through skill, not politics. Cole regarded each of them before speaking. "We hurt them, but we didn't break them. They will return harder and in greater numbers. We must seize the initiative before they can mount a proper offensive." Captain Victoria Stone, who commanded the battleship Warrior and had a reputation for aggressive tactics that made some uneasy, answered bluntly, "We can't sit on defense. Our supply lines are stretched. If we wait, we'll only react. I recommend we strike their staging areas, hit them where they think they're safe." Cole nodded. She had been thinking the same. "Agreed, but we need intelligence first." She turned to Commander Eric Phillips, Naval Intelligence Chief and probably the smartest officer in the fleet, though he would never claim the title. "What do we know about their command?" she asked. Eric brought up a holographic star map showing Skrull movements over the past 3 months. He'd analyzed communications, attack vectors, and supply routes. "They're not random raiders," he said. "They have a command structure, more pack-like than a formal chain of command. We've identified a primary staging area in the Korvath system." He highlighted a system deep in former Droth space. Jake Morrison studied the map. "What's their defensive strength?" "How many ships?" he asked. The first battle's success hadn't bred complacency. Eric hesitated. "Unknown," he admitted. "Based on patterns, probably 2,000 to 3,000, maybe more. They keep reinforcing from conquered worlds. The longer we delay, the stronger they get." Around the table, officers exchanged looks. The odds were long. Fighting some 3,000 ships with 2 battle groups meant being outnumbered, perhaps 7 to 1. Even exceptional training and weapons had limits. Cole decided quickly. Indecision had never been her weakness. We'll split forces into Battle Groups 1 and 2 to strike Corvath. Battle Groups 3 through 5 will establish defensive lines along the Council core worlds. If this fails, we must have fallback positions and protect the Elder races." Orders were dispatched within the hour, and the fleet began to move. The jump to Corvath would take 3 days. Even with human tech, there were speed limits. During those days, the crews ran checks, rehearsed simulations, and tried not to dwell on the odds. At Corvath's edge, they arrived dark, sensors passive. Surprise would be vital. Scans confirmed the worst. The system brimmed with scrawl vessels, thousands scattered across inner worlds like a metallic swarm. Lieutenant Sarah Collins, Vengeance's sensor officer and famed for her acuity, ran constant sweeps until her eyes ached. "Admiral," she reported, "I'm detecting multiple ship classes. Standard raiders, yes, but also larger vessels, likely command ships. Their signatures don't match anything in our database." Cole leaned forward over the data. "Mark them for priority targeting," she ordered, then broadcast to the fleet. "All ships, implement Plan Delta. We are going in fast." Plan Delta was a human-designed doctrine for situations like this. A lightning strike meant to inflict maximum damage before the enemy could reorganize. The idea was simple: jump in close, unleash everything, then withdraw before the swarm could overwhelm you. It demanded flawless timing, perfect coordination, and nerves of steel. Battleship captains took up assigned positions. Each officer knew exact roles, targets, and exit vectors. Chronometers were synchronized to microseconds because timing was everything. Then, on Cole's mark, they jumped. The human armada emerged already accelerating and firing. The first salvo struck without warning. One moment the system was quiet, the next it was full of human warships raining death, and dozens of Skrull vessels died before they realized they had been attacked. Captain Alex Turner of the Thunderbolt, known for calm under pressure, ran his ship's weapons with brutal efficiency. "Target that carrier group," he ordered, and the Thunderbolt responded in a coordinated ballet of heavy fire. The strike unfolded like clockwork. Broadsides slammed into staging zones. Carrier decks were shredded, logistics hubs vaporized. Human weapons and tactics, honed across centuries of internecine warfare, hit Skrull formations that had never seen such concentrated surgical aggression. The fleet pressed the assault for an unrelenting period. Explosions bloomed across orbital fields. Fighters tore through escort screens. Electronic warfare suites jammed Skrull sensors while missile volleys found gaps in the enemy array. When the human force finally disengaged, they left the Corvath system bleeding and disorganized. A blow intended not merely to kill ships, but to sever the supply lines and command nodes that allowed the Skrull to keep conquering. Even as they withdrew, Cole knew the campaign was far from over. The Skrull would adapt. They had to be denied safe havens and broken decisively. Intelligence harvested during the strike would guide the next moves, but every action would be measured against a grim truth. This enemy fought with numbers and fury, and time favored the side that could disrupt those advantages first. The officers aboard the Vengeance and across the fleet felt the weight of that responsibility. They had struck hard and struck true. But they'd also painted a target on the galaxy's back. There would be more fights, and each would demand the same discipline, courage, and ruthless clarity of purpose they'd shown at Corvath. "Command vessel, target all forward batteries and fire for effect," Captain Alex Turner ordered, his voice steady and sharp. His crew responded instantly. After 5 years of serving together, they moved like one mind. The Skrull command ship loomed ahead, a monstrous construct nearly 3 times the size of a human battleship, its surface sheathed in grotesque, pulsating, organic armor that glowed an unholy green. But mass and menace meant nothing when railgun slugs and fusion warheads struck in perfect synchrony. The vessel vanished in a blinding explosion that outshone the nearby planets, its death marked by a spreading halo of molten wreckage. Alex didn't smile or cheer. "Excellent shooting. Next target," he said simply. There was no time for Celebra. Over the following 3 months, human hunter groups swept through the stars, tracking and eliminating each surviving raider. One by one, they fell. until the last Skrull vessel, cornered in an asteroid belt on the edge of Valoran territory, was found and destroyed by a lone human cruiser. With that final kill, the Skrull threat was ended. The galaxy could finally exhale. Weeks later, Ambassador Kellen Briggs once again stood before the Galactic Council. But the room was not the same, nor were the eyes that watched him. Gone was the condescension, the quiet disbelief that had once colored every glance toward humanity. In its place was respect, and something else. Quieter but unmistakable, fear. The Valoran Prime stood at the center of the chamber, her crystalline body now steady and luminous once more, free of the flickering distress that had haunted it before. She regarded the human ambassador for a long moment, then inclined her head slightly, not as a gesture of diplomacy, but of acknowledgement, because now the galaxy understood. Humanity was not a young, reckless species stumbling into the stars. They were survivors, warriors forged by endless struggle. And when they chose to fight, even empires trembled. Command vessel and all forward batteries, fire for effect. His order was carried out instantly, for the crew had trained together for 5 years and knew each other's rhythm like instinct. The Skrull command ship loomed ahead, an immense, grotesque creation nearly 3 times the size of a human battleship, sheathed in pulsating organic armor that glowed with a sickly green hue. But all that bulk and armor counted for nothing when railgun slugs and fusion warheads struck it at once, consuming it in a fireball bright enough to be seen from the outer planets. Alex watched its destruction without expression and said only, "Excellent shooting." Next target. There was no time for celebration, not while thousands of enemy ships still filled the system. The Skrull retaliated with blind fury. Dormant vessels came alive, scrambling to respond. But their frenzy betrayed them. Panic led to collisions, and their wild, undisciplined salvos struck their own ships as often as human ones. Captain Helen Carter, commanding the cruiser Dauntless, found herself in the thick of the fighting. At least 20 Skrull raiders converged from all directions, but Helen had faced worse odds before. "Port batteries, continuous fire! Helm, keep us moving. Don't give them a stationary target." Her helmsman, Claire Murphy, a young pilot raised racing small craft in the asteroid belt, handled the massive cruiser like it was a fighter. The Dauntless twisted, rolled, and weaved through the enemy formation like a dancer. Every time a Skrull ship lined up a shot, Claire had already shifted position. The human fleet fought with cold, practiced precision. Every captain knew their role, their targets, and when to fire or maneuver. It was warfare distilled to both science and art, thousands of years of human combat experience refined into pure efficiency. After 23 minutes of relentless fighting, Admiral Cole ordered the withdrawal. The fleet jumped out in perfect sequence, leaving behind a debris field that had once been 3,000 Skrull vessels. What had been a staging area threatening the entire galaxy was now a graveyard. The fleet regrouped at a safe distance. Damage reports came in, no ships lost, though several required repair. Admiral Cole allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction before turning back to the next problem. The war wasn't over yet. Scattered Skrull remnants still lurked across the galaxy, but the invasion's backbone was broken. Without command or supply lines, the survivors became isolated, vulnerable prey. Human hunter groups spent the next 3 months tracking them down. 3 months after the strike on Korvath, the last Skrull raider was cornered and destroyed near the edge of Valoran territory, hiding among asteroids. Human sensors found it anyway, and a single cruiser ended it. With that final kill, the Skrull threat was gone, and the galaxy could breathe again. Ambassador Kellen Briggs stood once more in the council chambers. But this time, everything had changed. The elder races no longer looked at him with condescension or veiled disdain. Now there was respect in their eyes, and perhaps fear, for they had seen what humanity could unleash in war. And that knowledge altered everything. At the center of the chamber, the Valoran Prime's crystalline form glowed steady once again, free from the flickering distress that had marked their last meeting. She spoke with genuine gratitude. "Your people saved us. We acknowledge that debt. The Council recognizes that we were wrong to keep you at the fringes of our civilization." Kellen had waited 3 centuries to hear those words. When they came, he felt no triumph, only weariness. The war had cost too many lives, too much time that could have been spent building rather than destroying. "We did what had to be done," he said quietly. "And now we ask only one thing in return." The chamber fell silent. "Humanity will no longer remain on the periphery. We seek full council membership, with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities. We demand an equal voice in galactic affairs." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Theron, the Cathari speaker, sent out a telepathic pulse expressing both agreement and unease. Granting humans full status meant accepting them as equals, a notion some elder races still struggled with. Yet the vote was inevitable. None dared insult the species that had just saved them. When the tally came, it was unanimous. Humanity became a full member of the Galactic Council, and everything changed. Admiral Patricia Cole stepped down after 40 years of service, handing command of Battle Group 1 to Jake Morrison aboard the Vengeance. The ship's decks were lined with officers and crew who had served under her. Her farewell speech was short as always. "You did good work," she said simply. "Be proud. You showed the galaxy what humans can do when we stand together. You proved courage and discipline matter more than numbers or technology." She paused, looking at Jake. "Take care of them. They're the finest crew in the fleet." Jake accepted his promotion with his usual humility. "We were just doing our duty, Admiral. We followed your example." Cole shook her head. "No, you did more. You changed history. The galaxy will never see humanity the same way again, and that's a burden you'll carry for the rest of your career." Across human space, the fleets returned to cheers and parades. Medals were given, celebrations held. But the veterans knew the truth. They had done only what was necessary. They had answered the call, fought well, and that was enough. Captain Victoria Stone received promotion and command of Battle Group 3. Standing on her new flagship's bridge, she gazed out at the stars, thinking of what lay ahead. Threats still existed out there, dangers not yet met. Peace was fragile, and it would fall to humanity to defend it because the elder races had proven they could not. On Earth, the people rejoiced. Children played war games, pretending to be battleship captains. Veterans were honored with respect and gratitude. Yet when the crowds dispersed, those who had fought gathered quietly, speaking of lost comrades. Casualties had been light, but every loss carried weight. They understood what civilians could not. Victory always demanded a price. Lieutenant Amy Patterson returned home after 3 years. Her parents held a party, neighbors eager for stories. But Amy found it hard to speak of combat. The reality of war bore no resemblance to the games children played. Instead, she spoke of her crew and the pride of serving beside them. Commander Susan Blake re-enlisted, unable to leave the fleet that had become her family. She knew her duty wasn't done, and her experience was still needed. As the galaxy settled into its new balance, human patrols began appearing in systems once forbidden. At first, the elder races watched uneasily, but over time, they grew to welcome the sight. The gray-hulled ships represented safety. The Council restructured its defense protocols, placing humans in charge of military affairs, while the elder races focused on science, art, philosophy, and governance. Ambassador Briggs took his seat on the Council Security Committee, working with military leaders of every species to build a unified defense network. To his quiet satisfaction, the elder races began learning from human methods, despite millennia of tradition. Admiral Cole retired to her home on Luna, but continued advising new officers. They came seeking her counsel, and she shared it freely because she knew the next generation would face trials of their own. Jake Morrison commanded Battle Group 1 with the same calm authority as before, driving constant innovation in tactics and technology. Humanity never stopped striving to improve. The Skrull War had lasted only 6 months, from the Council's plea to the final battle, but its impact would echo through history. Humanity had proven a truth that could never be denied. They had earned their place among the stars. Years later, Captain Victoria Stone stood on her bridge, reviewing patrol routes through what had once been Droth space. She thought of the battles fought, the changes wrought, and knew humanity had entered the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. They could never return to being the ignored frontier species. With that new status came duty. The galaxy now looked to humans for protection. When the stars had called for help, humanity had answered, with battleships in perfect formation, and reminded the elder races of something they'd forgotten. Peace endures only when there is strength to defend it. The veterans knew this truth deeply, and they passed it on to officers, to cadets, to the next generation, until it became part of human culture.